Hi, welcome back to KJ Reports. I'm your host Hamza, and today we're going to be talking about the end of democracy. Is the end of democracy near? The system of government known as democracy is more or less a successful attempt to undo biology by replacing natural selection with majority-based selection. In the era of postmodernism, the very simulation of democratic procedures becomes completely unnecessary. In many countries, during the global lockdown in 2020, parliaments stopped playing even a symbolic role that they had before the pandemic. Executive branches, the so-called medical and scientific experts, rather than legislative power, were seen as the highest authority around the globe. There is an ongoing transformation of the entire global system of governance. Once the global order is reshaped, a new political system will likely be introduced. It might keep the old name and form, but humanity will gradually have to get used to living in a post-democracy world. Democracy as the rule of money. According to the official definition, democracy, or the rule of the people, is a system of government in which citizens exercise power directly, or elect representatives from amongst themselves to form a governing body. Although it is believed to be a universal political system, modern democracy is exclusively an export product of the Western civilization and is not compatible with other cultures. That is why it is extremely difficult for the United States to introduce and successfully implement democracies in countries like Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya. Socrates described democracy as the worst form of government and just a poor substitute for oligarchy. Socrates himself was the victim of democracy, as he was convicted through democratic procedure after citizens directly voted for his execution, even though it is very questionable if they even understood his work. Like other ruling systems, democracy is collapsing on its own contradictions. Modern democracy is just about 250 years old, and it has already reached its peak. Now it's declining. As John Adams, an American statesman and founding father who served as the second president of the United States from 1797 to 1801, once said, "Democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself. There never was a democracy yet that did not commit suicide." For those who are able to see and think, it will become obvious that democracy was never what it was believed to be. Its main weakness is the fact that people are not making any decisions. Oswald Spengler, a German historian, political writer, and philosopher, in his book The Decline of the West asserts that democracy is simply the political weapon of money, and the media are the means through which money operates a democratic political system. Beneath some great phrases about freedom, brotherhood, and equality lies the banal fact that money rules and democracy just serves as a cover. In other words, democracy is heavily linked with money, and it tends to hide oligarchy, which is the real decision maker in so-called democratic countries. Masses are, however, still obsessed with ballot boxes, as they genuinely believe that their future depends on a voting paper. During the Cold War, even the communist countries regularly held elections since they tended to simulate democracy. Winston Churchill, probably the most popular British Prime Minister ever, reportedly once said that the best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. Whether Churchill really said this or not, the point of this claim is that democracy symbolises the victory of quantity over quality. Democracy as the rule of oligarchy. Around 2,400 years ago, Plato expressed the excessive dangers of democracy. He claimed that the evils of this form of government lie in the possibilities that disciples will want to be equal to their masters. The very idea that all people are equal is wrong. It is quite debatable if everyone is capable of making political decisions. As the American comedian George Carlin wrote in his book Napalm and Silly Putty, ignorant citizens elect ignorant leaders. In the West, there is a relatively new political concept called the direct democracy, which learns that people, rather than its representatives, should, in a digital form, make decisions about all sorts of social and political problems in their communities. However, the main trouble for this theoretical framework is that it is practically inapplicable. For instance, how would the direct digital democracy work among millions of illiterate people in the developing world? Promoters of this concept suggest that there should be a group of young, educated pundits who would explain to the illiterate masses how to get involved in the decision-making process and then to vote on issues such as whether the government should provide more funds to healthcare or education systems. There is, however, no guarantee that the educated experts will not manipulate those they are directly supposed to educate. Thus, the very idea of a direct democracy is an illusionary concept that all people are fair and able to learn and understand politics. Democracy, if taken literally, is a utopia. If understood practically, it's a fraud. When a citizen asked Lycurgus, a legislator of ancient Sparta, why democracy had not been implemented as a form of government in the city of Sparta, he replied, "Establish first democracy in your house, if you can." At this point, it is too early to publicly declare the end of the so-called rule of the people. Democracy will likely continue to exist mainly through its name and form for a certain period of time. Even though power will be concentrated in the hands of oligarchy. In other words, masses will keep living in the illusion that they are involved in the policy-making process, but in reality, they can be easily silenced, and their basic human rights suspended, and their jobs ruined overnight. For the foreseeable future, people might officially have some form of democracy, but that does not mean that they will have freedom. It is also quite debatable if democracy equals freedom. From a theoretical perspective, democracy is based on the rights and freedoms of the individual. On the other hand, a nation operates with the rights and freedoms of collectivity. Between the terms free individual and free people lies an abyss that cannot be bridged. A nation, an ethnic group where people speak the same language, have the same history, culture, values and tradition, is an organic, self-supporting community, while a democratic society is inorganic and completely artificial. Since it is based on a community of like-minded people, democracy therefore, if taken as the rule of money, invalidates the very notion of a nation, because money, unlike nation, has neither soil nor blood. Democracy will lose. If democracy is the rule of money, in the next 50 years the global oligarchy will develop the most oppressive apparatus that human history has ever seen or experienced. Its main task will be to protect the interests of the oligarchic system. The global state of emergency that humanity experienced during the COVID pandemic was just the initial phase of this process in which science and technology will play very important roles. At this point, science appears to be the main global religion. Major traditional religions are teaching humanity that this world is null and void, and democracy, for its part, explains that the material world is the essence of human existence. Due to the inability of traditional confessions to respond to the current global system, a new religiosity will eventually emerge. But since life is not only existential but also symbolic, It is precisely these great symbols that democracy cannot abolish and will have to step down before them. Money, through democracy as its form, is fighting the last and greatest battle against man. In the end, democracy will lose. The ancient forces of blood are older and more powerful than the forces of money, and in the not so distant future will win over democracy.